Hello?
It's 7:30. It is.
Okay, I got you. How you doing?
Hey, I'm fantastic. Rick Levy, thank you for making time for us. And welcome. Tonight is our celebrity guest star, which, if you're not familiar with the concept, it's a little like if Backstage Pass and This Is Your Life had a baby. That's what you got. That's what you got, my man. It's been forever since we've spoken. Like what, maybe twice today already?
Yeah, well, that's okay. You know that we want to get it right. We want the people to have a nice time listening to what we're going to talk about. So that's great.
Absolutely. So, Rick, you know, you have been four decades. Yes, performer for 4 decades.
Actually longer. This 2025 will be my 61st year on stage.
No, it is not.
Yeah, 61st year on stage, because I started when I was 14 in Allentown, Pennsylvania, with my first garage band. And except for some brief stints, a month here, a couple of months there, even when I was doing some other kinds of work, I was always playing. And I guess since about 40 years ago, it's been just basically full-time managing, performing, booking. Yeah. So full-time. Yeah.
You are and I'm not telling you because clearly you know, but for the audience, Rick is an internationally known manager and performer, an author of High in the Mid-60s, How to Have a Fabulous Life in Music Without Being Famous, which is your memoir, which was released in 2018. Let's maybe work a little bit. We'll bounce around a little bit. Tell us about the book.
Well, you know, it's funny. It started as a journaling when I think I started writing it around 2000 when I was on the road. I was band leader for Peter Noon, Herman's Hermits. He had asked me to put a band together for him. And, you know, we were flying around a lot, and I was trying to journal and get ideas, wrap my head around how did I get to where I am? Because I really didn't have a whole lot of memories of my early childhood, what I call before music. You know, my life was kind of black and white, and then when I started playing, it went into color.
So, Wizard of Oz. Nice.
Yeah, really, pretty much, yeah. And it was like I started writing and going back, and, you know, what turned me on to these things. And, you know, I started remembering, for example, my dad's college roommate, who I called Uncle, Elliot Wexler, was in the business in New York City, in the record business. And, you know, I remember going to his apartment in New York and being able to stay up late, and there were records all over and, you know, a piano there. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. And then he'd come to visit, and he'd bring me album. He brought me the first Elvis Presley albums and stuff. And I was, at that time, 6 or 7 years old. I was young.
Hooked.
You know, of course, I took the mandatory piano lessons. I wish I would have kept up with that. And I went through some other instruments and stumbled onto guitar and liked it, and took lessons with a great jazz guitarist in my hometown in Allentown, PA. And actually, I just saw the Bob Dylan movie, which was so great. And it really struck a chord because I actually started in a folk duo with my sister. She was 3 years older. So we were playing Peter, Paul, and Mary, and we were playing Blowing in the Wind and If I Had a Hammer and all that kind of stuff. And then, like so many of our generation, saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. And I think within about 3 weeks, me and a couple buddies had the beginnings of a band together. And you know, all through high school, the band was called The Limits. A lot of people are aware of us. We did a lot of recording in the garage stuff in the 60s. And then in the 80s, we regrouped and did original stuff. And I started a label and learned about publishing and distribution. And I set up some licenses overseas. And it was really just kind of like stumbling in and saying, well, I'm going to learn this and I'm going to learn that. And that ultimately led me, before I moved to Florida, to getting a call from Jay Proctor from Jay and the Techniques, who were also out of Allentown, PA.
I did not know that.
Yeah, Jay, when they had their hits in 67, 68, and about 84, 85, Jay wanted to come back and start performing again. That was kind of like, if you remember, the mid-'80s was kind of the first resurgence of the 60s movement. And that's been proven out to be the fact when kids in their teens and early 20s start turning in their late 30s and 40s,
yep.
That's when that music starts to recycle again. Now, we're just incredibly lucky, our generation, that, our crazy people don't want to stop.
And then, I swear to God, that's so true.
Thank God. I mean, we will be, who would think any of the acts? I know you just talked to Tommy James and stuff, and we play with all these groups. I'm guitarist and manager with the Boxtops, and so we play with Tommy and Peter and the Buckinghams and the Grassroots and the Association and Felix Cavalieri, and we all say the same thing. I mean, who would have thought? Forget 30 years later, but 60 years later now, we're still selling out venues and selling out cruises and things like that.
Oh yeah, you've got a couple of things, and I mentioned this a lot. Mentioned it yesterday and to Tommy. Don't you feel like when you're on, Flower Power, you're on. Oh God, what's the Happy Together tour? And you look
out. The Happy Together tour. We have the Concerts at Sea in Alaska coming up in September.
That's right.
The next thing we have is actually just north of Chicago in Waukegan on February 7th. Great theater called the Genesee Theater. It's just an old historic theater. And we've got our American Pop Show, which is us, the Buckinghams, and the Grassroots. And we do probably 5, 6, 7 of those a year. And it's just a great package of, it's like turning on the radio back then. Just hit after hit after hit.
Oh my God, I love that. And it has to just sell out in a blink. And so you're on these cruises and you do shows like that. You look out over the audience. Isn't it amazing? You're like, gotta be 3, maybe 4th generation by now. And they're singing along. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. I mean, we've on occasion when we're playing The Letter, we'll just stop singing. We'll be playing it, and we'll just let the entire audience is singing it. And of course, it's mostly baby boomers, but especially when we're doing festivals and fairs, something like that, you've got their kids, you've got the grandkids, and they all know these songs, not just ours, but everybody's, because they're in commercials, they're in movies, they're on TV shows. I don't know what's going to be when the touring finally stops, 8 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever it may be, who knows?
Never.
Will there be, will this golden age of rock and roll finally, have seen its day? Who knows? I think the great songs will always last, but there'll be diminishing returns as time goes on, obviously.
No kidding. I mean, this entire program I do on Saturday nights really is predicated and built upon that music. It is hopeful. It is optimistic. You can understand the lyrics. It's poignant. It's memorable, and it's honestly, it's woven into the fabric of our lives, if that makes sense.
It is. And I talk about this a lot with guys on the road and everything. And one of the differences, of course, we didn't have that many choices of entertainment and information back in the 60s. AM radio, that was one of the great things about AM radio. You could hear the Boxtops, Johnny Cash, the Osmonds, Herman's Hermit, all in an hour. You could hear all these different styles of music, country, soul, all these different things. Now, there's so much with streaming and, thousands and thousands of internet radio stations and whatnot, that kids, unfortunately, and I really think it is unfortunate, they are not exposed to anything other than the specific genre that they happen to be into at the moment.
Yeah. I mean,
And
honestly, you go back 777, was the beginning of the decline, I think, of radio. So, meaning that if, it was, I guess it would be what, a deregulation. You could have 7 AMs, 7 FMs, and 7 TV stations. That way, no one no one has a monopoly. And then all of a sudden, blink, and you've got some idiot in New York programming 3,500 stations
well, that's the other thing.
Playing 12 songs a day.
Yeah, the disc jockeys used to have to be incredibly knowledgeable. They were personalities. Now, I guess the consulting started probably in the late 80s, early 90s. And like you said, somebody in New York or LA is consulting their whole, corporate line of radio stations and playing the same things over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
And DJs, disc jockeys were personalities. I mean, you look at your Cousin Brucey's and people like that. And every town had them. And then you had the big national guys, too, And I can remember, back with the Limits, playing a local radio station, a dance on a Friday night. And there'd be 1,000 kids, And it was the thing to do, the place to be. We were lucky enough to be one of the popular bands in our area. There were quite a few really good ones. And, to this day, a couple of people have passed away, but the friendships formed in that time in my life in high school are still the most significant friendships of my life, without question. We still talk about gigs that we played together and experiences that we had. And of course, for me, it became kind of like the kid in the candy store, because I ended up performing with so many of these artists that, were my heroes coming up. Maybe I was just a few years younger than some of them, but they were having the hit records. Tommy Roe's a great example. He's not that much older, but he and I still have almost like a father-son relationship, And I guess I played and took care of tour management for him on and off for 20 years. And I still try to get him out of retirement, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen anymore. I think he's finally happy to hang it up. Travel is not easy anymore. Travel is really tough. Yeah. And, I think that's one of the things that, makes some of the artists think twice about going back out on the road.
I remember one last comment, I guess, on music, especially early, and getting access to radio and how things catch fire, and all of a sudden you're riding a wave. I remember, and undoubtedly on these tours, you must bump into to Ron Dante, yes?
Oh, sure. He's a good friend. Yeah. He'll be on the Alaska cruise with us, a matter of fact.
Ron tells the story about being in San Francisco. Promoter goes in, hands DJ a record. DJ looks at it and goes, I don't know. So the guy, the promoter tore the label. This is Sugar. So he tears the label off and said, how about now? Play it. And he played it like a couple of times. Phone lines light up, catches fire out of not small, but a station in San Francisco. And next thing you know, and within weeks, it's number one. How does that happen?
Well, I think the same thing happened to Tommy James. He was out of the Midwest, and then a DJ in Pittsburgh started playing Hanky Panky.
Oh, yeah.
And Tommy had to start touring, and his band didn't want to go, didn't want to leave the Midwest. He had to put a whole new band together. And, that's just the way it happened. Or a B, what the record company thought was the A side didn't do anything, and then the B side took off.
Or sometimes they played the B by accident. It was just that,
exactly.
That crazy.
And of course with the Boxtops, here were these kids from Memphis. Bill Cunningham, Gary, Alex Chilton, and this was their first time in a recording studio, their first time recording, their first record becomes one of the biggest songs of the decade. So. There's no rule.
And they haven't been out of Memphis much. They're like, what?
Oh, they never were. No, they never were. And, and then the next thing they know it, they're on the road 300 days a year, and like every other act back in the day, getting ripped off by their management.
Oh, yeah.
And those stories are well known because every artist will tell you the same stories. Whether it's the Beatles or the Stones or us or Tommy James. Yeah,
I can tell you with a high degree of certainty that in fact, everyone I have spoken to so far, there isn't one that wasn't ripped off. I talked to Gary yesterday about, the DJ manager, right? I mean, come on.
Right. And that was pretty normal. You'd have the local DJ, who had some relationship with the label promo guy who would come to the radio station. So the DJ says, well, I'll be a manager. And he finds a group in town, and another DJ finds a group in town, and they get him a little deal. And, the kids, first of all, the parents probably had to sign the contracts back then because we were all under 21. And, the next thing you know, 90 cents is going into the manager's pocket and a dime is going into the artist. Maybe. And back then, of course, it was the exception where the artists wrote their own music. And that of course started to change with the Beatles. Tommy Rowe wrote his own stuff, but Peter Noone, hit after hit after hit. Well, he didn't write any of those. So the ongoing royalty money to the writers, he didn't participate in.
Yeah. He had to
but that began to change as more bands started writing their own songs and everything like that. And now kids are so sophisticated. I mean, if someone's going to be signed, they've already got a legal team with them. They've got an accounting firm with them, But if you ask the artists from back in the day, and I'm sure you have, they'll all say the same thing. They wouldn't change anything, and they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it any differently, because they had so much fun.
Oh yeah, Ron, Tommy, all of them. Roulette Records. I mean, that's well documented. But they basically go, you know what? We sent out 1 million records. They all came back. Why don't you kids go hit the road and make some money? And then you're okay. Thanks.
Exactly. And now it's kind of come full circle in that the streaming royalties are so pathetically small that unless you're a mega star, Taylor Swift,
sure,
you're not making anything in streaming. So the only money, once again, is in playing live.
Yeah.
So, but it's a double-edged sword because, it's like, I'm not saying concert prices should be like they were back in the day of, $3, $5,
right,
but $500, $1,000 for a ticket, that's just not what popular music is supposed to be about. Yeah. Right. It's just not supposed to be that.
So let's go back a little bit. Band leader for Peter Noone of Herman's Hermits. What's that entail? What was that like? And any good road stories?
Yeah, it was good. We're still good friends. I had met him back in the mid to late 80s. He didn't carry a full band with him back then. He had a music director. And when he came through our area, I was in Pennsylvania still, I would get a call from his MD because it's kind of a small fraternity of musicians. Rick, can you get a couple of guys, and play behind us on this show? So, that's how it started. And then we were doing a show in Hong Kong, and my band was backing Dennis Yost from the Classics Tour,
yeah,
and I want to say the Drifters and somebody else, I forget, and Peter was on the bill. He was the headliner, and he had a band then, and he and I were kind of hanging in the back of the hall toward the end of the show, and he goes, well, what do you think? I said, man, you sound great. You sound really great, but your band, they're great musicians, but they sound like, they sound like a hard rock band. They're not doing your songs justice. And he goes, oh, I know. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I said, well, if I can ever help you, just give me a call. About a year later, I get a call. He said, I want to go back to the way it was in the 60s, So I handpicked 3 other guys plus myself. And for about 3 years, we worked together with him. And it was, I mean, he always has great musicians. His band now is fabulous, but we probably had the most authentic 60s sounding version of the Hermits, and toured a lot, played a lot, you know, I made a lot of connections, which I, of course, have capitalized on over the years. But one of the, I won't even call it a problem. One of the realities was, at the time I was doing that with him, I had still been booking Jay and the Techniques, Dennis Yost, Freddie Cannon, Barbara Lewis, Tommy Rowe. So I was busy doing those things. And what began to happen is I couldn't do both.
Yeah.
I couldn't maintain that touring schedule. I don't know how he does it today. I mean, Peter's 77 and he's still doing over 100 shows a year. I mean, that's gargantuan amount of travel.
Yeah.
You know, I God bless him. But, you know, so, you know, he and I both, you know, it kind of hit the time that, you know, Rick, you should go and do your thing. And I said, yeah, I know I should, and blah, blah, blah. And like I say, we do, you know, we usually cross paths once or twice a year on the show. And, you know, we're always friendly, and, you know, it's like, but everything's a stepping stone. You know, I went on to doing more tour management. You know, I started working more with Tommy Rowe, and we started working a lot. And I got involved with the Boxtops in the beginning just as their manager booker, because they were, this would have been 96. They were probably the only touring band with all the founding members in them, all 5 of the original members.
Oh, God.
And yeah, it was pretty rare. And then, so I did that, you know, booking them up till 2010, till Alex died.
Right.
And while I was doing that, of course, then I was still playing with Tommy, with Freddie Cannon, with Jay and the Techniques. I had already moved to Florida by then. I've been in Florida like 30 years already. But, you know, I kept in touch with Gary and Bill, and because I was still getting calls, you know, are the Boxtops working? And, you know, well, we found out there were 2 phony Boxtops working, you know, 2 acts using the name that had no people in the band at all.
God.
So when we decided to put it back together in the end of 2015, the first thing Bill did, because Bill's background, Bill Cunningham, I'm talking about, one of the founding guys,
right.
His background was with the International Trade Commission in the federal government. So he knew all about trademark law and everything. The first thing we did is made sure that, you know, that the original guys owned the trademark. And then we went after the 2 phony groups and put them out of business.
Good.
And, yeah, it's one thing I've always had a peeve about. You know, I mean, it happens now. Someone might own the name and they license it, and that's okay. But, you know, if it's just, you know, a bunch of guys just assembling themselves and calling them whatever, I mean, that's really fraud. You know, is basic, but pure and simple. No, now if you called it a tribute, you know, if you had a band and called it The Letter, a tribute to the Boxtops,
sure,
well, that would be fine. People know they'd be seeing a tribute show, like all the Beatles shows and everything, you know. But then since beginning of 2016, it's been, for me, exclusively with the Boxtops, managing, handling all the contracts with our booking agent, payroll, taxes, all that kind of stuff. So it's, you know, it's not overwhelming. Sometimes it's super busy. Sometimes we have a lot of time in between shows. But we like to, you know, we want to work enough that we always keep tight and fresh.
Yeah.
And so far, that's pretty much the way it's been.
What's the life like? I think I asked Gary. What do you think? What do you make of it? What's the life like when you're doing a cruise? Crazy, hectic? Is it relaxed? Is it a little bit of both?
Depends the cruise. The Flower Power is just nuts. It's just great because Star Vista, which is the company that does it, and they not only do the 60s Flower Power, they do a 70s cruise, they do a doo-wop cruise, I think they do a country cruise, they do a lot of them. But they lease the entire ship. So like on Flower Power, you probably got 2,500 to 3,000 fans, you know. And you've got concerts going on from like 11 in the morning till past midnight every day of the week. So it's not only the name acts, but you have some tribute bands.
Sure.
You have some great cover bands. You have some solo artists. Then you also have like trivia things and meet and greets and
DJs.
Q&A sessions. So there's always something going on. If you want to chill and relax, you basically got to go to your cabin and just shut off for a while. I'll go up to the gym at the top of they always have a nice workout area at the top of the ships. And, I like to work out while I'm on board and everything. But the nice thing is 99% of the fans, first of all, a lot of them become your friends. They respect your privacy. They'll say, they'll come up and say, I hope I'm not bothering you. I just wanted to say I loved your show last night. Nice. And we'll get to talking. If we're on the bikes together, riding bike, well, we're going to talk, I mean, without them, we wouldn't be here. That's the bottom line.
So as a performer, so let's say you're with the Boxtops and you're booked on a cruise, one show a day, couple shows a day?
Well, it depends on the cruise. Like on the Flower Power, there's so many bands on Flower Power cruise. They split us up into two groups. One group of artists goes on the first half of the cruise, gets off midway, and the second group of artists comes on.
Interesting.
So like we're only on, let's say, 3 days or 3 nights and 3.5 days. So in that short time period, each of the recording artists will do 2 shows. We might do one in the theater. We might do one by the pool. We might do one in the big lounge, that kind of thing. Now on the Alaska cruise, that's a small, it's a ship, and only a certain number of people are taking part in the concerts at sea. They call it concerts at sea.
Interesting.
And there's not as many bands. There's this year, I think there's us, there's the Buckinghams, there's Ron Dante, there's Joey Mullins and Badfinger, and I think Brian Hyland.
Oh, nice.
So each act will do like 1 or 2 shows in the week. So we have a lot more free time on that cruise, and it's not as crowded. So it's more of a chill.
But it's a nice quality of life as a performer?
Pardon me?
Nice quality of life as a performer,
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to be a contract performer on a ship for 6 months. I would never want to do that personally.
Yeah.
I just, I'm just, that's not my cup of tea. But yeah, I mean, listen, I've chosen this life, and with it comes the ups and downs, good years, not so good years, working when you're not feeling well, but and then sadly, over the last 10 years, seeing a lot of friends dying off.
I know. So
people we know and people we know and loved, and not only in the performing realm, but people in the business that we know, agents and tour promoters and things like that, and a week doesn't go by that I don't get an email or two that somebody's gone. It's just a matter of time, but you can't think about it. You just, I mean, they say, people ask me, when am I going to stop? I said, well, I'm going to stop, when somebody comes into my condo and finds me lying on the floor.
When I don't come down for breakfast.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, I still play locally. I have a duo, and my partner and I play around St. Augustine because it's what we do.
DNA.
We play music because we like to play music. Now, there's other things that interest me a lot too. I mean, and getting back to the book, I mean, the whole story of the book is the journey of how I went from this local kid in Allentown to, kind of climbing the rung of the ladder of the music that I loved, and, at one point I knew all the executives, everybody, but it's really changed. I mean, I don't think I'd want to be a young kid coming up in the music business anymore, because it's just, there's so many more variables now. It used to be, at least kind of linear. If you did A, you could get to B. If you did B, you could get that local DJ to be your manager. he could get you to the promo guy at Columbia or Capitol or a small label or whatever. You might get a single out, it might do something, now, notwithstanding all that, you're probably still going to get ripped off, but you could be on the train anyway. Now I think there's just so many other distractions. And, I think for the audience too, for like the listening audience, especially for young kids, music is just one of hundreds of information choices they have. Oh, I'll stream this. No, I'm going to go to this movie. No, I'm going to go to this sports thing. No, I'm going to go to, it's not like you said it before, how it was the fabric of our life. Well, it was the fabric of our life. It reflected, as we know, especially the 60s and 70s, it reflected the social times. It helped change the social times. I don't think there's ever been, a 10, 15-year period that was as informative and life-changing as the 60s, early 70s decade. I just don't see it. I haven't seen anything since that, I mean, I guess things circle around and it could come back, but I don't know. I just don't know. But I know that it changed me, and, it's, I feel grateful. I feel humble, and I feel grateful that I've been able to do this.
So the Boxtops, the letter, big hit during Vietnam. And I think about, like Ron's, Sugar, right? The height of Vietnam. And here's, so it's all the sort of dark social music. And here comes Sugar.
Yeah, you always need that. And, and Tommy Rose, a great example. He said, man, you can call me the king of bubblegum all day long. I don't care. He had songs that made you feel good, and we need that. Yeah. We needed that. We always need that. I think we need it today a lot too, but that was the great thing. You could be hearing Riders on the Storm, and then you could hear Last Train to Clarksville, and it's like, oh yeah, or Pleasant Valley Sunday or something like that, and it's like, it was a different time. I mean, I remember Bill and I were talking one time. He said, back in the 60s, let's say I got a call on a Friday night for a gig Saturday. I could call 3 other guys in Allentown, PA that I knew, and we could play together Saturday night, even if we never had played, because we all were in bands and we all knew the same songs.
Oh God, how great.
But you get a lot of young bands now. They know what they've written. They know their few songs. But, I doubt a lot of them have ever done, all night jam sessions even, that's one fun thing on the shift we do on the Flower Power. Like at 9 a.m, our keyboardist, Mike Stewart, told me about it. He kept wanting me to drag me up. And so I go up to the top deck one morning, and there's a Puerto Rican Beatles tribute band called the Jukebox Beatles. And they're great. They do all like real early Beatles, 62 and 63 and 64. Them and me and Mike and some passengers on the ship, and we're just passing around guitars, and we're just playing like 2 hours every morning, playing songs.
That's got to be the best.
So that separation of artist versus fan, or artist versus friend, or them versus us, it starts to melt away. And it's a nice thing. Now, sometimes you want it. Sometimes you want your privacy, and, there's nothing wrong with taking that. I mean, for me, I have other interests. I'm a professional pottery maker too, and I love doing that. That's like, kind of meditation time for me, throwing clay and everything. And the funny thing is, though, most of it I sell to music fans. I put it up on my Facebook page, and I would say 95% has been sold to people who know me through seeing me perform.
Well, it certainly doesn't hurt that the name of your pottery company is Glazed and Confused, So
I don't know how that came to me, but it did, and it's a lot of people have commented on it. Yeah.
I will tell you, I Googled it because I knew it was the name, but I wanted to find your website, and the only other instances of that are companies that sell donuts. So go figure.
That's a good one. Okay, that I get. Yeah, so, I have and I tell, when I do interviews, people could find me on Facebook. Just, put my name in there, Rick Levy, and, put St. Augustine. That'll bring me up for sure. And send a friend request. Come to my website, ricklevy.com, or come to the Boxtops site, boxtops.com. We have like a Boxtops. We don't call it a fan club. We call it friends and family.
Nice.
Sign up. We let them know ahead of time when we're coming into an area to play. If we're going to release anything new, they get the first shot at it and stuff. And, it just builds a community. It builds a nice community.
You and I spoke yesterday, and it was a question I had written down for Gary and didn't get a chance to ask him. So if you would kindly tell the story of the Boxtops. I think it was England versus just Europe per se. Do you remember the tour?
Yeah, this was obviously before I was in the band. This was probably 68, maybe 69 or something. And they were going to do their first tour of England because, and they had The Letter was a hit over there. Cry Like a Baby was a hit. But again, through this mismanagement and lack of, detail, they go over, and I think, as Gary told me, they were paired up with like a reggae band or something. And these guys had like equipment that you couldn't play a VFW home with this stuff. You couldn't play the Moose Lodge with this stuff. It was like, beat up, torn up, no sound system, no nothing. And here are guys who, sold a few million records already. And, the band as a unit just revolted. And they said, no, we're not doing this, and they probably would have, wouldn't have gotten paid anyway. So they took time and just, hung around Europe for a while. But since then, in the later incarnations, we've done shows in Spain and Belgium and Italy and France, Germany. 2018 was a big year for us. We were now back performing a couple of years already, and we got a call. There was a big TV special being shot in Hamburg, Germany. There was a TV host over there named Thomas Gottschalk, and he was like the Johnny Carson of late night TV. And he was doing like a big 68 special, 67, 68 special. And, God, they had a big budget. They could have had anybody they wanted, but the guy wanted us. They also had Donovan. They had Melanie. They had Klaus Vormann from Germany, who had, quite a history with the Beatles and John Lennon. And then they had a lot of European artists that we didn't know, but who were great. And we shot a TV show over there, and they were nice enough and it was like, it was a multi-million-dollar production. It was just, and they were nice enough to let us use, the video of The Letter that we did, the performance, as a promotional piece. So that was October of 2018. Then we come back, and November 1st, we're inducted into the Memphis Music Hall of Fame.
Oh, yes.
And that was a big thing. I mean, again, not being original, mine was more vicarious, but I could see for Bill and Gary, and John Evans was still living at the time, one of the original guys. He's since passed on. Bill and Gary are the only two guys left alive from the original lineup. But that was an amazing night. Jerry Lee Lewis showed up, and Eddie Floyd, and it was sensational. And it happened to fall, November 1st happened to fall on my birthday. And Priscilla Presley was one of the hosts, one of the MCs. And I have this great picture of her giving me a birthday kiss.
Oh,
and my God. I mean, she's still a very beautiful woman, And then about a week after that, Crossroad Press released my memoir, because when I wrote this thing, going back to that, it eventually started getting into the place where people started telling me, your story is interesting because it's like you're not the bride, you're the bridesmaid. And I've always said that, I'm kind of like one of the guys that keeps the wheels greased in whatever operation I've been with. And I'm fine with that. I mean, but I think as a roadmap or as a survival guide or something for not just musicians, but people who have a passion and they want to follow it, you know what? You got to be prepared that you're going to fall on your face a few times, more than a few times. And if you're not willing to get up, and that's what I started to trace. Where did it collapse? Because when I was 20, in between, the limits and starting the touring business, I had another band in Philly, and we signed a big contract with Bob Crew. I'm sure you remember the name Bob Crew.
Absolutely.
The record producer, Four Seasons, all that stuff. And we got a gob of money. We were spending money like it was going out of style. This band was called Wax. Yeah, this band was called Wax, WAX, out of Philadelphia. And we're about 3 weeks into the recording in New York City, and the IRS shuts Bob's label down.
Oh.
And so here we are. We signed this big deal. I had just turned 21, and then it was like the bottom dropped out. It was like everything that I attached my identity to was gone. And in a way, it was a blessing because it made me realize there's got to be something. There's got to be something beyond that, besides this, to balance me. I mean, for me personally, I got into meditation, yoga, all those things, but it was a really, it was a hard time in my life. But I knew, okay, I'm going to get up and keep doing this. So as people read little bits of this journal, they said, this would be a cool book. But one of the things I had in my mind was, okay, if I do this, I don't want to self-publish it. If I can't get a publisher who's going to believe in it, I'll just let it go. Yeah. And, I submitted to a bunch of places, didn't get anything, especially the big ones. And then there was a publisher in Carolina, Crossroad Press, and he basically did sci-fi and horror stuff. But he was the head of it, David Wilson. He was a big 60s music fan. And he somehow heard about the Limits. I don't know how, but it's just like, we've got this cult following all over the world. And, he got in touch with me. I got in touch. We talked. I said, well, it just so happens. And I sent him the manuscript, and he said, there's something really here. It needs some editing. I said, I can do that. A friend of mine was a professional editor, and she jumped right in the task. And, next thing I knew, I had this book on Amazon. So it's an audio book, it's a digital book, it's in print, and it's, I haven't gotten rich from it, but everybody's made some money from it. And, I'll be at a gig and people will bring up a copy of it. Can you sign this? Yeah, happy to, So, so it's just so crazy, and like I'm 75 and I'm thinking, I put this guitar on and going on stage, and we're all like we're 15 again. That's the addiction. That's the addiction.
Well said. Well said.
And you get the ego out of it. You stop bitching about the monitors and the sound system. Some people get so hung up on that, and I always remind them. Like we'll be at a sound check, and somebody will be bitching and moaning. I'll say, "Wait a minute. When we started out, there was no such thing as a monitor. We didn't have any of those things. You know how to play and sing. Just play and sing, And everybody kind of says, "Oh yeah, we know what we're doing." And of course, all of us, in our fraternity of this era of artists, we do know what we're doing, and I think in most cases we're better players and singers and musicians now than we were then.
I have a few more questions I want to go over, and also a quick story. So you're you're the only person I've ever spoken to that's taken the route that you have. Question number one: is it like what was it, like 10% booking back then? Does that sound about right? book a band?
Yeah. You get 10 to 15%, and most agents still take that. Managers take their cut.
Yeah.
The pie is still divided up. Believe me.
Yeah. And bands, I briefly dabbled in what you do. I mean, that was a side part of my official role, but I booked. It's funny, the bands. I don't want to say bands on the way up and bands on the way down, but the ones that I'll use the phrase on the way down. It's not quite fair, but. They either handle it with style and grace, and they're delighted that people still remember them and enjoy their music, and then there's others that maybe are just a little bitter about being. So anyway, I booked.
No, I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
I booked a band shall remain nameless. They had a hit, "Born to Be Wild." I think you're with me here. And I remember, so I was trying to handle all the things that you would have handled. So I had to handle production and the contract writer and all that stuff. And I think I think it was pretty basic, like separate monitor mix, which you would expect. But for whatever reason, I couldn't find it that particular day, and he threatened to sue us, and he never did. But it was like born to be. Turn that. It was like just ruined everything.
There's no reason for that. I mean, and you know what, artists who can be problematic get a reputation, if not to the audiences, to within other artists. Within the industry. Oh, this guy's a pain, or she's a pain to work with, or and we're not curing cancer.
Right.
We're not preventing the next war, but we are making people happy for an hour or 2 or 3 hours, and that has value. And why screw that up with your own stupid ego needs?
Yeah.
And some people never outgrow that, unfortunately. I'm very, we, when I say the Boxtops, the 5 of us, we're all very lucky that we're all simpatico together. Everyone's always willing to chip in and help whatever needs to get done. And I said it. I mean, if this would be the last act that I work with until I hang it up, I'd be very happy.
So you've worked with a number of names that we all recognize. And
I backed dozens and dozens, probably close to 100, including ones that were just a one-off, playing guitar for somebody for a night or two or something like that.
So when I say a favorite, I don't mean that the others aren't favorites. And by favorite, it could literally come down to some magical evening you had, like everything was just amazing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a couple, and they're very disparate. I mean, overall favorite, I will have to say the Boxtops, because everything just fits together.
Perfect.
The personalities are very different. Bill's very analytical, very much a perfectionist. Gary and I are more loose and just want to play the group, but it all works together. Playing behind Bo Diddley was like, oh, this is cool. Oh, this is great. Sometimes playing with Freddie Cannon was just phenomenal, because he was such a goofball and his hearing was so bad that and I will say this, I have never in my whole life played louder than when I played with Freddie Cannon. So it kind of took you back to that old garage thing, because he really liked rock and roll to be rock and roll. So we had a great time, and he was just funnier than hell. And I have a lot of gratitude for Jay Proctor, Jay and the Techniques, because that's where it started for me touring. And, that's where I made all the contacts that I made. It all came from that period of time touring with him and backing up other acts who didn't carry their own bands. That's why we worked so much back then, because it would be a show with Jay and Jay and the Techniques. And let's say you had the Tokens and a Barbara Lewis and the Crystals. Well, we'd back all those guys up on a show, And then sometimes it wasn't even with an act I played. When I was with Peter Noon, we opened for James Brown.
Oh God!
And one of the highlights of my life was being the keyboard player, sneaking in to James Brown's sound check and just sitting in the back of the hall for like 2 hours and saying, wait a minute, I'm like seeing Michelangelo here. I'm seeing Rembrandt here. I'm seeing, I'm seeing everything that constitutes genius, and it was like, well, what a gift. What a gift to do that. Never really got to talk to him other than, hello, Mr. Brown, but I didn't need to. I wasn't there to do that.
Right.
It's like going back to school. It was like, it was being back in school.
But the experience, I mean, right? Life, it's just life altering in a lot of ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Some accolades. Tell me about Beale Street.
Well, yeah. So I guess it was a year or more ago, Bill and Gary got notified that the Beale Street Foundation wanted to honor the Boxtops with a brass note. They have this brass note on Beale Street, kind of like the Hollywood Walk.
Yep.
They actually have a brass music note with the name engraved in it. So you got Elvis there and Jerry Lee and B.B. King and, Aretha and all these, legendary people. And, we didn't know when it was going to be. There was, it had to coincide with everybody's schedule. So September, we had a show coming up in Houston. So, Bill got in touch with the powers to be down in Memphis because he still knows a ton of people there. And we worked it out to go to Memphis a day early and do the ceremony. And it was really fun. It was right on Beale Street at a club on Beale Street called the Rum Boogie Cafe. And it's a ongoing club, not a fancy hall. We set up on this small little stage, and there was just a bunch of people in the audience, and they did the presentation, beautiful brass note to Bill and Gary. And there were some people that they hadn't seen in probably 50 years from Memphis that came out. And I know two of the guys who passed away, Danny Smythe, the original drummer, his widow came, and John Evans' widow came. So there was a lot of emotion, a lot of emotion. And we had, that was a really great time and a deserved accolade. Oftentimes, I mean, Memphis is such an important city. I mean, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame probably should be in Memphis because that's really where country and blues and rockabilly and gospel and soul all melted together into rock and roll. That's where it happened. It didn't happen in Cleveland. I'm sorry. I know Alan Freed was there and, whatever. And, it's okay. But I think to be honored there, I think was very, very, it was meaningful for me, and I'm not an original member. Right. I've been involved with the guys for years, but, for Bill and Gary, I think it was great, to bring this group back, back into the limelight within our sphere of music, in the 60s sphere, a name now that everybody recognizes, everybody who's seen the show loves it. There's very little, if any, anymore. Oh, well, Alex Chilton isn't here. You shouldn't be doing this. Well, you could say that about a lot of people, yep. And one of the things we do is we don't try to sound like Alex. Alex was Alex, but Gary's got, I mean, he has that Memphis growl. He still has it, but we divide our show up so that Bill, Gary, and I all sing lead on certain songs. So, which I always like that idea too, because it gives the audience just a change of sonics, sure. Of sound, because, besides the hits and some of the album cuts, we do, every song in the show has a connection to Memphis. So it's either with a producer that they worked with or a songwriter or somebody they knew, this, that, or the other thing. So we'll cover, if we're doing a long show by ourselves, we'll cover, rock, soul, we'll do some blues, we'll do some country, we'll do some rockabilly, so it's a really, And then we have videos for every single show. Every single song has its own video.
Oh, that's what an awesome multimedia experience, really.
It's very nice. So if we're playing, Cry Like a Baby, you'll see a different set of montages and clips than if we're playing Soul Deep. And it just, and a lot of it, of course, is then and now. And, like one of the songs we always do is Green Onions, because, two of the guys, and as I told you yesterday, two of the guys in Booker T and the MGs, Steve Cropper and Duck Dunn, went to the same high school as Bill and Gary. So, when we're playing Green Onions, well, we're going to flash Booker T and up there and on the stage and everything and things like that. So there's, and we tell a lot of stories too. A lot of really neat stories about Memphis that, the average person doesn't know. And they're cool stories. They're really cool music stories.
And musically back then, as you said at the top of the beginning of the program, it really reflected who, where, when, what we were living, what we were feeling, what we were thinking, right? So, hey, listen, we are quickly coming up on an hour. I swear, I feel like we could probably talk at least another couple hours.
Well, we can do it again sometime if you want to. Obviously, there's lots to do.
I would love to do that.
I'll just say, invite the people again to go to the boxtops.com. They can check the tour schedule. They can order CDs, see pictures, videos. Go to my site, which is ricklevy.com. That has a link to the book, High in the Mid-60s. As I said, they could get a print copy, they can get an ebook, or they could get an audio book. So, we make that pretty easy. And, if anybody, the next show we have coming up is February 7th. Up at the Genesee Theater in Waukegan, Illinois, just north of Chicago. And that's us, the Grassroots and the Buckinghams. Then we got the Flower Power Cruise. And so, and more often than not, someone who will hear this show will come up to me or Gary and say, I heard you on Mr. Saturday Night.
Nice.
And that's great. That's fun. We like it. If we didn't like people, we wouldn't be doing this, You got to honor the music. You got to honor the music. That's one thing I always think. If you're going to play 60s music, don't make it sound like, a modern rock band or a hard rock. Try to honor the records because they were hit records because they sounded so great.
And you guys are so true. You look at any YouTube video or live performance, you are so true to the original catalog. You really, really are.
We really worked hard at it. I mean, we deconstructed everything, and build it up. And, we have our specific jobs, whether it's vocally, and Gary and I work a lot together being the two guitarists, I mean, as innocuous as if he's playing, up toward the headstock of the guitar, I'll play at the at the bottom of the neck to give it a whole, give it more life, more color, more flavor. Nice. And and Bill writes all the, we use live horns at every show. We don't use synthesizers. It costs us money, but we hire a live horn section because that's the way Memphis music was back then.
Well, you and Carl can share that expense, right?
Right, yeah, and I was going to bring it up. I mean, they're damn Buckinghams are great.
Yeah.
They're so full of life, and and they do the same thing. Carl and Nick, and even their guitarist Dave, they switch off singing leads. I think it's listen. If you're a Peter Noonan or a Tommy James, sure, then obviously you're going to be the singer of the show. Yeah. But if you have a band, that's kind of the cool thing. I mean, even Mick lets Keith Richards sing a song or two in the show.
That's right.
But yeah, I appreciate that because we do work hard at it. Yeah, thank you.
Two quick comments, and maybe it varies depending on. I'll just ask the question: Do you like a small, intimate audience or a large stadium type crowd? What do you like?
I like both, but I'd rather play to a more intimate crowd.
Fair.
Yeah. I mean, I love theater. I love the old theaters because they sound great.
Yeah.
Like the Genesee where we're going. When you're talking 1,000, 2,000 people, But we've done clubs too. We did a number of the city winery clubs, and we did the Cafe Wa in Greenwich Village.
Oh,
yeah, because we wanted to. Yeah, we had another gig up in Long Island, and we knew it wasn't going to pay much, but it's an important venue to do, and that's great when you can almost sweat on the people. But there is also a thrill when you playing a big place. If it's like one of the multi-act shows and you're in a stadium or in a big 5,000 seater or something like that. But it's not, there's not as much communication with the audience. Let's put it that way.
It has to be a whole different experience. One last question, and
Sure.
I'm going to say there's no answer to this, and it may vary. It may vary by the night. Your favorite Boxtop song to perform?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Well, you got to love the letter because it's just so ubiquitous. It's part of everyone's consciousness. Me, I love Neon Rainbow because I actually go from guitar to ukulele on that song. So we add to that whole Summer of Love kind of psychedelic feel of that song. And, as soon as that happens, when people see me putting on a ukulele, you can see their faces. What's going on here? If they haven't seen us before, and just that introduction of the song on the ukulele, it's like, I mean, these guys have been playing like stone hard R&B all night, and now comes the one Boxtops Flower Power song. But a great song it is. So yeah, and there's, great, I mean, like, I take Cry Like a Baby when Gary plays the electric sitar. Well, boy, that you don't hear that sound every day, So it's hard to pinpoint. Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint.
Listen, I can never, ever thank you enough, and I promise you there will be a part 2 to this. We'll get busy selling some books for you and some pottery.
My pleasure.
And some pottery. Thank you, and then that's where the program will end. I will ask you if you'd be so kind, and I play this lots of times during other shows. Would you be so kind and say, this is Rick Levy of the Boxtops, and you're listening to Mr. Saturday Night, or anything you care to say like that?
Sure. Should I do it now?
Anytime you're ready.
Okay. Hey, gang, this is Rick Levy with the Boxtops. And if you're like me, you're listening to Mr. Saturday Night right now.
You're awesome. Thank you so much for giving up practically your entire evening. Are you heading back to the pottery studio tonight, or are you all done?
Tomorrow I'm going to be throwing some clay, yeah.
Right.
And then I got a gig, and then I got a local gig over the weekend.
Okay,
yeah.
Good man. Next time I'm in St. Augie, I'll look you up.
Okay, man. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it, Mike.
Thanks,
See
brother.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.